And we are live. So welcome everyone. Welcome to PMI and the PMP exam, past, present, and future. This is our third episode. We did this last year a couple of times, and this is the very first time in 2021. So it gives us great pleasure to do this again.
Yep.
Let's start off by going over what our main goals are. So Mark, do you want to give us a high-level overview about our main goals once we get done with the intros? So let's go into the intros first. Susan, do you want to give an intro?
Sure. I was just trying to figure out who of the three of us is past, who's present, and who's future. It's like the Christmas Carol, like the ghosts of past, present, and future.
Hey, you can look at my hair and that answers that question.
Oh dear.
All right, so thank you everybody for being here. So this is me. I'm an engineer, consultant. I kind of fell into project management. I know I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of us did. I was doing this thing, just getting stuff done, and then somebody told me, hey, that's project management, and hey, why don't you go get a certification? So I got mine. I want to say it was 2006. Which definitely I know is not the oldest one on the call here for sure. And then after that, I got my ACP and a myriad of other certifications. I now have 15 certifications, 10 of which are in Agile. Others are in risk management, and I'm still working on some others right now. I'm actually currently working on getting my ATP, going through that training. So I have some commentary on that. When it's appropriate in our conversation. I've done a lot of software development in both the private sector and the federal sector. A lot of federal government work for about 6 different federal agencies. And just basically, I like teaching about project management, and I love risk management and Agile. Those are my particular passions. And I love bringing my experience to the teaching space. That's probably my favorite thing to do. So I like doing the consulting and the teaching. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Susan. All right, let's go to our friend Mark. Mark, there we go.
So I'm the old dude. I'm the past. So yes, you can see on the slide, I got my PMP in 1995, the end of 95, and we were on the draft of version 1 at that time. How many pages? I think we said this in our last podcast, Phil, but how many pages you think the draft of version 1 was?
I don't know. I think I guessed like 120, 150 or something.
That would be true for version 1. Version 1 was 160 pages, I think. The draft of version 1 was only 64 pages.
Wow.
Ooh, I was thinking 50. And by the way, I got a trivial question right the other day, because I know that you got your PMP in like 95, 96, and it asked like, what year did the first one come out? And I knew because of when you got yours. So
actually there was version 1 of the PMBOK guide, since we're into trivia, came out in 96, but they actually published something in 1987 called the PMBOK. And then they realized the error of their ways. No, this can't be a project management body of knowledge. That's much too voluminous. And no, and it was also less than 100 pages. And so they quickly realized their error. And from that point on, when they finally came out with version 1, almost a decade later, they made it a guide to the PMBOK. So they've been very clear about that. So my career was, again, part as a technical guy. So I worked for Hewlett Packard for 27 years as a systems engineer for the first half of that, and then project management and program management. So I was a software guy and operating system specialist, and then moved into project management. And I love, like Susan, I love teaching too. And now I'm kind of shifting gears and winding down, I think, some of the teaching aspects of things and trying to evolve more into just writing. So Susan and I worked on, we published a book last year on hybrid project management. And so really happy about that. And we plan to do some more stuff along those lines. So sequels or some other books too. Yeah,
Lovely
thank you.
stuff.
Thank you for putting that up. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the book, and you can find it on Amazon. And I would have shown you my copy. I've got mine, and honestly, we need more companies, more people being intelligent about how projects can be run. And honestly, if you haven't gotten the book, it's one of a kind, my friends. You want to go on down to Amazon, look for it. I think Mark and Susan's work needs a lot more rah-rah. So, you might have seen some of my posts on it. Truly, truly admire and support what they've done. So thank you, folks. Thank you, Mark. I've got a trivia question, Mark. Which version was Bill Duncan involved in?
Yeah,
Because
version 1. So
oh, is it one? I see.
he's the author of version 1, correct?
Wow. Wow. Anyway, let's not start on that note, Mark. Let's go into my intro really quick. My name's Phil. You probably see me on social media, on YouTube. I love project management, got thrown into it after my master's. I met this professor out in the UK when I was doing my construction information master's. And his name is Keith Jones. And he said, Phil, why don't you write a dissertation on project management system barriers in companies? So I was running around like a crazy person trying to get people's opinion about project management information systems and the barriers to it. And I met a lot of resistance in companies because they thought I had a hidden agenda, because early 2000s, a lot of companies weren't even aware of what project management systems were. So it was kind of new to them, but I got done with it. And I thought that I knew a thing or two about project management until I met someone who was a PMP and a Prince 2 certified practitioner out of DHL. I made the mistake of going for an interview at DHL here in Phoenix, and I was like a dummy, like a deer in the headlights, just disaster. I mean, talk about equating the software development lifecycle to the process groups. Oh, it was a disaster. And the funny thing is, I thought I knew project management. So when I realized that I knew nothing, I started from ground zero. I met a mentor. Her name is Mary Hirschner. And we were working in this company for this project, a DoD project. And she said, Phil, you'd make a good candidate for PMP. Why don't you look into it? So I did. I looked into it and I said, it's a lot of content, but it seems like it's something good to do. So I asked my boss, and I know a lot of people can picture this when the boss says, no, that's a bunch of rubbish. It's just certification. You can't replace all of my engineering experience with a piece of paper. No, don't do it. So I ended up almost not doing it, but then I decided I was going to invest in it. So I invested in it, I did it. And honestly, after that point, my salary went up 300%. I got approached by all manner of companies, General Dynamics, ended up working at American, ended up working at one of my favorite companies, Honeywell. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of getting more and more into the evangelical movement of the PMI, right? To carrying the PMBOK guide around like a crazed man of the cloth trying to convert people. That's been the story of our lives, right? It's been the story of our lives. And I think that's what brings all of us together. And on top of that, Susan, Mark, and I, we're all from engineering backgrounds. And you know how engineers are. We're always curious. We're always trying to challenge the status quo. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here, Mark. So,
right.
Mark, do you want to give us an overview about why we're here and, the journey?
Okay, so you actually drafted, I think when people registered, they saw your agenda, your draft of your agenda. So why don't we I was thinking we would just base things off that, Phil.
This one?
I'm not seeing it there. No, I think I saw some bullets like talk about the PMP exam today.
Right,
so
right.
Can we do a poll, Phil? Can we ask how many people on the call are PMPs, or how many, and then secondly, how many are looking to get their PMP this year?
Right. So just read this question as, are you a PMP? Let's share that poll. So we're going to use a poll of yes or no, A for yes, B for no. So forget the year, it doesn't have to be 2021. Did you take the PMP sometime, whenever? Yes or no? Could have been 1995, like Mark. Okay.
That's 5.
All right.
So everybody?
Yeah, well, I think that's almost it. 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll. And those are the results. Oh, 83% said no.
Okay.
One says yes. And that means, Mark, now we know our audience. We know a lot of the questions. In fact, we just got a question from Melanie about the exam after version 7. So a lot of folks are here to understand how the future affects them, Mark. So that's good. Good to know.
Okay, so for the 5 that are not PMPs, are you planning to get your PMP this year or sometime? You know, is that on the radar scope?
That's a great question. So let's go to this one that is more like it. And let's relaunch the poll. So are you looking at getting a PMI certification, PMP in the next 1 year plus, or even 1 day? Some of you are taking it in a few days. We know that. All right, 3, 2, and 1.
All of them are. So awesome. So
Good.
awesome. Okay, so if you want, can we just stick with that topic and then we'll move on to the other agenda items, because I think this is kind of hot on the press right now.
Hot on the
So
press.
For me, I think there's good news and bad news for you guys looking to get it. Let's do the good news. The good news is that it's much easier now to get your certification. What we're seeing with the company is using materials I put together for 2021 for the new ATP program, as we call it. And we're seeing virtually a 100% pass rate, believe it or not.
Why did you say it, Mark?
And because probably before in 2020 and earlier, I used to think it was about I think what PMI had been kind of calibrating things for was to get a 70% pass rate. That's kind of the common wisdom, the rumor that was out there, that there was about a 70% rate. But I think in recent years, and maybe from 2018, 2019, it actually got harder, and we saw the pass rate maybe drop below 70%. And that's even for people taking classes and courses. It was really, to be honest, it was a brutal test. It's always had that reputation. So Susan, Phil, back me up on that. That was
absolutely.
Yeah, I have a colleague of mine going to take it next week, and I said, "Well, I got some good news for you. Right now, it seems to be a softball coming down the middle, so you just got to swing." I don't think that's good news for the profession, and I think it waters down things for those who have it. I'm actually a little surprised, because usually when there's a change, it makes it harder. It's also particularly, my understanding is if you have a good Agile background, it's even easier. So, so my colleague actually has a big Agile background. So, right. If I had to bet, I'd bet a lot of money he's going to pass it, and he's smart too.
Yeah, the students coming back are saying they're actually, PMI had said it's going to be 50-50 traditional and Agile. And the students coming back now are saying actually in their mind, it was more Agile than traditional.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And you know, it's a little bit little disconcerting to me, because I have an ACP and I teach ACP, the PMI Agile Certified Practitioner. And when you ask about that, it's like, well, what does this mean to the ACP? They're like, it's still sticking around, but it doesn't make sense. And so that's where I think we're 3 left brain people here. So we're like, I wouldn't say we don't use our right brains, but it's got to register with the left, and it does not register for me. And it also is disconcerting to me, because people have asked me too. I'm interested in Agile. What should I do? And I still recommend the PMI ACP.
Yes, I just hit the record button, so I apologize.
So
but
I would
go on, Mark.
I would recommend, even though it is, hopefully it's not the CSM, the Certified Scrum Master, which has always had a 100% pass rate as far as I know. So hopefully it doesn't become that. But I still would recommend that you take a class. I think that's very, very good. A good idea.
Well, you know,
you have
go ahead.
So you have 2 choices, obviously. PMI wants you to go to, you know, one of the authorized training partners, an ATP. They want you to do that. That's probably going to be that's the more expensive option. So here in the US, probably the going rate for a 4-day class, whether it's virtual or in person, They are opening up and they are doing in-person classes now. But the going rate is probably going to be around at least $2,000 for that 4-day class. That's going to be a little more expensive than the non-ATP classes. What we're seeing, so I've again put together non-ATP materials, and we are seeing a 100% pass rate, 99% plus pass rate in our classes, which are quite a bit less expensive. And also, I think they're much easier to get through, much easier to deal with. I paid for and I sat in an ATP class back in early December just so I could see what it was all about, and I was not impressed. It was 760 slides, believe it or not. That is almost impossible for the poor instructor to try to get through in 4 days. And it's also very, very difficult for the poor students to put up with that. I mean, you're going at the speed of light through slides if you're going to try to get through 760 slides in 4 days. And then the instructor on the last day of the class, he was very, very good, by the way, but he could not devote the amount of time that was needed and was deserved for many of the topics. He just had to pass through them very superficially to get through all the material. And then he said at the last day of the class, don't you dare go take this test right now or in the next couple of days. You need to read another book. And so part of the ATP materials includes a 400 plus page student workbook that covered a lot of things that he did not have time to touch on in the 4-day class. And he said, you need to read this 400-page student workbook and take 2 to 3 weeks studying it and doing the exercises in it. Oh, by the way, we didn't have time in our class to do exercises, to do quizzes and stuff, or just, they were very, very brief, the few questions that were asked, and they were not representative of the type of PMP questions that most of us are familiar with. So I think some of the non-ATP things are going to be much more, it's the type of thing that you're going to be able to handle. Also, the ATP materials to me were not real cohesive. They kind of skipped around. There was a lot of duplication. It was tremendously focused on kind of HR concepts, so team building concepts over and over again. They've kind of turned, it seems to me, they've kind of turned the certification into almost a HR certification and an Agile certification. And to me, that's wrong. Again, kind of along the lines of what Susan was saying a minute ago, the PMP was, and the PMBOK guide was always meant to support all projects. And when we said all projects, we meant all projects in all industries, no matter what contract type is the primary contract type, and no matter how complex. So it covered soup to nuts. It covered everything from construction, the roots of project management, through healthcare, to software, to you name it. And we're not using this kind of agile theory, agile culture on a lot of those types of projects. You're not doing that in a construction project where you've outsourced almost all the work to a bunch of subcontractors working under fixed price contracts. I'm sorry, you're not doing create a high performing team, that first module of the ATP class. You're not doing that.
Let's be honest. I mean, it's very nice. I mean, we're all Agile maniacs, right? I know Mark and Susan are Agile maniacs. I'm an Agile maniac. I love Agile. I love hybrid. And PMI's research has shown that when you are Agile in thinking, not Agile in software development, not Agile in product development, but when you are Agile in thinking, your efficiency goes through the roof. Whether you are a very Agile company or not Agile company in your development, it's in the thinking. And I think PMI has missed that very important concept, that it is not about the development. It's primarily about the thinking. You could be predictive in how you execute the project, but Agile in thinking. And that has been shown, even by PMI's research, to give you a massive payoff. So I think in the exuberance to accentuate the importance of Agile, they have not been able to distinguish agile thinking from agile software development. They lump it all together. And that's why I keep saying page 8 and 9 in the Agile Practice Guide, that is what people need to focus on primarily. And you could still be predictive. As a Stacy complexity model suggests, why are you trying to fit everything into agile development when it needs to be in the predictive zone? Am I making sense? You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think
I agree. These are tools in a toolbox. I'm not going to show up just with a hammer, because a hammer is a great way to get a nail in the wall. What if I got to screw something in? What if it's a bolt and I need a wrench or something like that? So I've never been like just this way or nothing, and I think that's what inspired Mark and I to write about hybrid project management using agile and traditional. The other thing I wanted to just bounce off of what Mark said about why it's important to still take a class. So yes, you want to get some letters after your name, and Lord knows I got a lot of letters after my name. But the real value, I think, in any education, and I also teach at 3 universities. I'm an adjunct professor. The real value is what you can then take with you that next day and apply at work, and the work that you do. And my feeling from my experience in teaching and my experience with other instructors like Mark, I know tons of project management instructors, the ones that are small businesses like Phil, like Mark, like myself, we have to be great, because to compete with the much larger businesses, we have to be great at teaching. And so what we're interested in is not just you passing the test, but you applying this to the work that you do. And so, yay, you passed the test. But if you can't apply it, I've worked with people who don't really understand the PMBOK guide. They don't really understand the best practices, even though they got that. I have clients who are program managers, I'm not going to name names, in very large organizations who didn't understand project risk management. That's a problem if you're a program manager. And my take is they took a class, they sat for the exam, and they passed it somehow, but they didn't really learn it and embody it. And so you got to think for yourself. It's not just the certification letters, it's can I apply it? And even if you kind of get away with an easy test, what happens when you show up for a client or you show up at an interview at a company and they ask you and expect you to apply and understand and know the PMBOK guide, and maybe even teach your colleagues, because that's what people are being pushed to do now is, oh, you know that, so you can go show everybody else about it. So if you just eked by and passed that exam or went to an inferior trainer, then that's what you're going to get. And so at this point, it seems to me that having that ATP status does not mean what people may think it means.
Exactly.
I think that the people like Phil and Mark, especially, I don't have my own PMP material. I actually use Mark's. But if somebody who's created that material has really put their heart and soul into it and has spent plenty of time, as I'm sure Phil and Mark can both tell you, into updating that material to make sure you have everything you need for this exam. But that I always recommend to people, I'm like, whether I'm your teacher or not, or you go with someone I know, just go with a small company because that somebody else has recommended. You know, it's the same thing I would say if you're going to bring your car to a mechanic or to a dentist, get a recommendation. Don't just look somebody up in the book and get the one with the biggest ad. Because chances are that's not the best dentist or car mechanic. So
it's absolutely true. And I'll just, chip in here because I've seen Mark's material and been through his questions. And I'm like, my goodness, this guy put all of his attention and focus into creating this content. And even the PMI questions, to be quite honest with you, those are of an agile nature that I saw in the last year's mock exam. They did not equate to what I saw from Mark. So for those thinking of, oh, ATP, that means I'm going to get the best in the world. No, you're not. No, you're not. So you want people.
Sorry, Phil. Sorry to interrupt.
Go on.
So I know a number of PMP instructors still doing it today, and 3 of them are teaching also for ATP companies. I won't mention the companies. Guess what? universally, they hate it.
Oh, wow.
All these instructors hate the eight. I mean, in strong terms, they voiced it that way. And they said, one of them said, I do not know one of the instructors in our company that enjoys teaching this class.
Mm,
It's a bear.
I'm not surprised.
Sorry,
My,
PMI. Here
they
I
did
am.
very
I
poorly.
am this longtime servant of PMI, and I really viewed it that way. You know,
Yep.
I got involved in the Washington, D.C. PMI chapter shortly after getting my PMP in 1996, and I served
Mhm.
on the board as a volunteer in a number of different capacities. I was the trustee of the chapter
Mhm.
from 2009 to 2013, and I was kind of, you know, chapter and verse, just singing the praises and
Mhm.
supporting PMI.
Yeah.
And so it breaks my heart to
Mhm.
say a lot of these things that I'm saying, but
Yep.
I don't feel like I started this. I feel like in the last year, year and a half, 2 years, it's PMI.
Yep.
PMI has started divorce proceedings, if you will, with people like me. They've thrown the small companies like my company under the bus.
And there was no prenup.
No, no. So, yeah. Anyway,
So I think the big takeaway is PMI, if you're listening, because I know you listen to our content. I know you listen to my material. I know you think I'm crazy. You probably think we're all crazy, but we're not crazy. We're very serious. Mark has been in this game much longer than I have. So take a look at the credibility of the individuals you're dealing with, right? Mark has been a servant leader in that chapter. And when you do things like this, you are not only diminishing what he has put in, you're also diminishing the path forward in that you're hacking off all of these poor chapters by saying you can't be an ATP. So to the side, you can't even do your so-called chapter PMP trainings anymore. That is a very poor way of dealing with stakeholders. So our takeaway, PMI, is think about your stakeholders, okay? This ATP program is quite draconian in mindset. It's very decisive in a bad way in that if you cannot pay this, if you cannot do this, if you cannot meet this, then you're cast to the side. And the thing is, the companies such as Marx, who have gone out for the past decades, putting PMP right there in the forefront. Speaking for PMI, we cannot do that in the capacity we used to. No wonder the numbers have dropped. Mark, let's change the discussion. Susan, what are your thoughts on the drop of the PMP by 6,000 since January? What are your comments on that?
so first, Phil, lay the background. I think
Yeah.
going in, so there were over 1 million PMPs up to January of this year. So here's your numbers right there. So you're seeing which one's the one on the left. The one on the left is January. The one on the right is the latest numbers from the end of May. So you go down about 2/3 down each slide. You can see in January, there were 1,157,624 PMPs. And now at the end of May, that's dropped by 6,000 down to 1,151,458. So we don't know until we see a longer track, a longer set of data here, whether that is just a blip in the curve and the numbers are going to turn around and start going back up. I've seen other times where the numbers dropped, but just in a very small way. So, but this is 6 months for a drop. So it'll be interesting to see if this is more of a important, significant trend. The one thing to keep in mind too is the number of companies teaching the classes. So up through 2020, with the REP program, the Registered Education Program, there were over 2,000
Yep.
REPs, and a lot of them small companies like my company. And now today, where it's now changed to an ATP program, the latest PMI has not released the information, but the latest information I've gotten from kind of the rumor mill, if you will, is that there are about 500 ATP companies. Also, there are very few chapters that chose to be ATPs. As far as I know, there's only a handful, less than 5 chapters chose to be ATPs. There's really nothing in it for them anymore to do that.
There are many factors, and being the engineers you are, like me, I mean, you look at these numbers and you say, which of these trends is a downward trend? And the only one is PMP. All the others are upward. All the others are increases, except PMP.
That's the first thing I noticed. So you can't say it's a general thing. I mean, there may be a little bit of new test anxiety, but at this point, people have been saying, if you go out there to LinkedIn, any of the groups, people have been saying that this one is easier. So I don't think that would stop people from being there. I also wonder, could there just be some attrition? Like literally, I mean, that number's gone down. So that means somebody said, you know what, I'm not going to stay certified.
Right.
That's actually pretty remarkable. I mean, the only one good reason I can see for that is retirement. I had a friend who kind of went into retirement, and there's like a retirement status where it puts it on hold. Right. But yeah, that's a lot. I mean, everything else, even if it stayed the same, I wouldn't be so worried. But the fact that it actually went down, that's remarkable. And you see the numbers, directly visible above in the total. In the total members, like it's almost the same number.
Right.
So it does show that decline. Now I wonder, I feel like somebody at PMI might be telling the story, see, we're losing them to Agile. But I don't agree with that story. I don't think that we should be throwing out traditional project management for Agile. I mean, I've been in the professional IT industry for many years, and I've seen us go from centralized to decentralized and back to centralized computing, right? And it's going to keep going back and forth. And there are cases for both. And it's great as we get into things, we learn more, but I feel that there's going to be a resurgence for traditional project management, because I see a lot of organizations going Agile, and they're going Agile in name only. They're going Agile where they really shouldn't. So if you want to make a project with a known scope take longer than it should and cost more than it should, go ahead and use an Agile approach. I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not a anti-Agilist, okay? So I'm all for Agile, but if you use it inappropriately, you'll actually take longer and cost more to do something. So the inappropriately would be when the scope isn't going to change. And people say, well, what kind of project is that? Well, paving a driveway. I mean, it's a project. Your driveway gets paved, your neighbor's driveway gets paved. Believe me, the person paving that driveway has paved so many driveways, they can tell you exactly how long it's going to take. They can tell you how long it's going to cure depending upon the temperature and the humidity outside. Okay, so it's like a really known entity. And so for a project like that, you don't want to use Agile. In fact, if you did use Agile, what would you be doing? You'd be standing around with the customer, asking them about what's of value to them, what do they want, are there any changes they want? No, they just want their driveway paved. And they don't even want to stand there and watch you do it. They want to go inside where it doesn't smell like tar, right? So it's like we can't look at it and say every project is Agile. Then I think that
They're not.
We ruin it. We ruin the value in standard. I mean, how did the Egyptians build the pyramids? Did they use Agile or traditional? My guess is traditional, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But I mean, those are some massive projects, and I don't think Agile was around back then, but you never know. Maybe they had their own way of looking at it.
It's a great point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great point, Susan, because we've had awesome projects right from the beginning of time, like the one you mentioned, the pyramids of Giza, 2560 BC, the Great Wall of China, 200 and something, BC or whenever it was. But at the end of the day, we cannot base going forward on just agile. I think PMI, they're so crazed with wanting to catch up with what the Scrum Alliance and the Agile Alliance have done. And of course, we know they partnered with the Agile Alliance, but they've become so crazed and frothing at the mouth for more of the Agile domain, more of that market share, that they are forgetting what put them on the map, and they're forgetting the 50 years that they put in since the late 60s into just ecumenical or agnostic view to project management. They're forgetting that, because the PMBOK guide, whether you like it or not, knowledge areas, they cut across any kind of project, even agile. I mean, just look at page 90, 91, 92 in this book. They map how you do things in agile to knowledge areas. So for PMI to come up saying, well, we need to change the PMBOK guide 7th edition to have these, Mark, those strange sounding principles
and domains.
Should we talk about that for a second?
What's that?
Should we talk about that for a second? Your views and Susan's views on the new framework?
I think there were, before we get to that, Phil, something really brief that you answered in the text, but I'm not sure if everybody saw it. There was a good, very, very good question. Are we going to experience another main change in the exam this fall when version 7 comes out? So version 7 is supposed to be released at the end of August. Typically, when PMI has done that in the past, they waited 6 months before changing the exam. But as Phil answered, I do not believe they will be changing the exam really at all for version 7. And so now they're saying we're basing the exam off what's called the ECO, the Examination Content Outline, which is only a 15-page document. It's on PMI.org. And that's also called the Role Delineation Study. So the main domains, there are 3 new domains in the ECO, a Role Delineation Study. So it's people, process, and business environment today make up the test. And the ATP courses are taking those 3 domains, people, process, business environment, and the company that created their ATP course, a company called Logical Operations, translated those 3 domains into 5 modules that kind of align with that in a certain way. And you do not know, a lot of people really worried, oh, I've got to know the tasks. I've got to know all these little things that are in the ECO and what domain are they in? No, you don't. That, as far as we can tell, that is not on the test. And you do not need to know the logical operations 5 modules and how they align with the 3 domains either. So that's not on the test. So anyway, they are saying, PMI is saying that the ECO has always been the main driver for the test, but up until this year, the ECO was basically our 5 process groups, but those were the 5 domains of the previous ECO. So initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing were the 5 domains of the previous ECO. So Phil's showing you the percentages of questions. On the left is the old ECO, and on the right is the 2021 ECO for the test today. And they're saying that this on the right is going to drive the test. And so they just really changed the test for this in January, and that's probably going to exist. This is going to last for 4 years. They typically only change the ECO every 4 years, just like they release a new PMBOK guide every 4 years.
Yeah, it's a huge change, as people can see, and I don't disagree that people is an incredibly important part of project management. As far as testing for it, I mean, maybe this is my left brain going off, but I think we need to understand processes and how to apply processes. Yes, soft skills make the difference between you being an effective project manager or not. but if you don't know the tools and techniques and how to apply things and how to do those processes, you're going to be a really nice person and things are going to run amok.
And for
You know,
teaching this stuff, put that slide back up again, Phil, if you don't mind.
Let's do that.
But for teaching this stuff, for the students in my classes, and like Phil, Susan, I've been teaching PMP prep classes for 12 years, 13 years now, kind of as my full-time occupation. Tell me, you guys tell me, isn't it a heck of a lot more intuitive, more commonsensical, make more sense to track by the knowledge areas, to kind of go through, integration, start with, initiating, develop charter, go into develop project management plan, go through the scope planning processes and stuff, go into scheduling, go into cost, go into quality. Isn't that's a lot more intuitive. Students can track with me when I'm, flowing through things. Here, people process business. We're kind of bouncing all around the place. Where are we? So it's just not nearly as intuitive. And you're missing out. This is not a good framework. This is not a solid, good framework for teaching this stuff. And the original writers, so Phil mentioned him before. So William Duncan, who started everything in 1996 with basically the same knowledge areas that we still have today, pretty much the same thing. They knew what they were doing. And that, that is a lot more commonsensical. For me, project management 101, you're starting with what are called the 5 W's: who, what, when, why. And then if you add how that maps in, those 5 W's and how map into the knowledge areas pretty much too. That's a good, solid framework.
Absolutely, Mark. And I've had, a lot of students be confused about, I don't know what I need to know for the exam. Do I need to know the 5 process groups? And we got a question in from one of our friends, Daryl, who is now PMP, one of my esteemed PMPs. And thanks for coming, Daryl. And the question is, do I still need to know page 25? And, based on what Susan said, every inch, yes. Know what the entire landscape looks like. So when you go into a company to help them and add value to them, you're not all over the place, because people process business. They're just lost.
I would definitely agree. Know page 25, know the process matrix, the 10 knowledge areas, the all the different processes and how they map the 49 processes. But you do not need to know the one part of it that seems to have gone away and diminished immensely is the ITTO, the inputs, the tools and techniques, and the outputs. That used to be the key strategy that I would use for teaching my class, to kind of follow the flow of the key ITTO through the processes, explain, okay, what are my key outputs here? What are my key outputs in a process like validate scope? And so, of course, we've got, accepted deliverables and change requests and updates and stuff, and then track that back, then work your way back to the key tools. So variance analysis, and then back to the key inputs. Oh, the scope baseline. And so it all glues together and ties together. Guess what? You don't need to know that anymore. You don't need to know the intimate details, if you will, of all the ITTO and how they flow through the processes. Susan's crying. She's, oh, you should know that and stuff. And me too, being part of the old guard and thinking that's important. A huge mistake they made really with version 5. They started it with version 5 and then just doubled down on this mistake. In version 6 was the explosion of the ITTO. So in version 5, we had something like 570 ITTO. And guess what it became in version 6? It became over 1,400 ITTO. And that just became mind-boggling.
Yeah, I'd say everything but the kitchen sink. I know because risk management is one of my subject matter areas, and for risk identification, I think it's kind of like the inputs are everything but the kitchen sink.
That's right. It's really hard to fit that on a PowerPoint slide.
well, it's like duh. So how do I figure out uncertainty on my project? Well, you look at everything you have, right? That's where you look for uncertainty. You look everywhere, right? But then
How many project managers know what the heck an influence diagram is? How many of them use it in their day-to-day lives, or know what design for X is?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do like the knowledge areas. One of the reasons I like knowledge areas is because when people come into the exam, for example, I'd started in manufacturing as an engineer, so I knew a lot about quality management, right? So pretty much, you know, when I was reviewing that section, I was flipping the page, like I got it. And so I think the knowledge areas helps people who are coming from different backgrounds, because they can say, okay, I know this knowledge area, I know this knowledge area. Okay, these are the ones I don't know. You know, so pretty much nobody knows integration management because that's a PMI thing that they made up, right? But it helps you to focus your study. Also, from somebody who's both developed and taught university courses, they're still using those knowledge areas to teach.
Yeah.
Because I teach a risk management course that is underneath project management for an MBA program. So that is a key thing that you need to learn. I don't teach one that's called people, you know, like people and project management, because you'd be like, well, what the heck are you going to learn in that? Like it's not finite enough. So I think that structure is still going to be there. Plus the process groups that initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. I mean, going back to what Phil said, if you look at an agile iteration, let's say a 2-week iteration, guess what? That 2-week iteration has initiation. So I plan that iteration. I start the iteration. I do planning. So there's my planning. Then I execute it. I have my daily stand-up meeting. We do the work. We do that for 2 weeks. While I'm doing that, I'm monitoring, controlling. How am I doing that? Well, in the daily stand-up, I'm doing that. I'm doing it in my reporting, in my information radiators, and my burn down charts, monitoring, controlling, and then closing. I review what we've done with the customer, and then we do a retrospective where we do lessons learned. That's traditional project management. And I've always taught Agile as like, you've got a little mini project. It's a 2-week-long project or a 1-week-long project. And I wish that they weren't throwing out those process groups.
That's huge. What's the precursor, if you will? What's the precursor of the 5 process groups? What's the foundation? The plan, do, check, act loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Deming. And guess what? Every major quality methodology, every proprietary methodology, whether it's Six Sigma, ISO 9000, TQM, Toyota production system, they all base everything off the PDCA loop. And Agile's taking that and speeding it up. It's doing things even faster with the iterations of the plan, do, check, act loop.
Well, Mark and Susan, I beg to differ. The future project management that PMI envisages is not the PDCA. It's the team, stakeholders, lifecycle planning, navigating uncertainty and ambiguity, delivery, perform. I mean, you're already winded out before you complete the ridiculous thing.
Phil's pushing our buttons. He's punching our buttons.
I think Phil's trying to be the future, because see how his glasses changed? He's got that futuristic look. He's trying to be aerodynamic so he can get through it real.
I'm trying to be like the PMI. They think they've got the eureka, this is the future, and they give us these 8 performance domains. But let's talk about the knowledge areas that you have gone through, and they're so intuitive. And then let's take a look at these 8 performance domains. We don't even know what they are. Are these meant to replace the process groups or the knowledge areas? On both counts, it's a fail, massive fail.
It's all over the map.
All over.
You've got some kind of map into knowledge areas. You've got stakeholders. One of the performance domains obviously maps into stakeholder management. Team maps into part of resource management. But now you've got some process groups in there too. You've got planning mapping into the planning process group, and you've got delivery, which off the top of my head kind of maps into executing. And I could think of performance as measuring performance, so monitoring and controlling. You know what? So we're all over the map. We're all over the map here.
And then project work, I don't even know what that is. I mean, that's executing or what?
Yeah, that to me, that's execution. So somebody asked, is it still important to have a deep understanding of the knowledge areas and processes? I think from a being able to apply this to the work that you do, I think so. I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of tree hugging the 6th edition. I don't I'm afraid what the 7th edition is going to be. And I've been reorganizing things in my office, and I think I did throw out my 3rd edition. That's what I tested on. I think for a while I was hanging on to it for sort of nostalgic reasons. I'm not throwing out my 6th edition because I'm afraid what it's going to replace is not going to be valuable to me. That's crazy. Isn't that crazy? So I think, yes, I think you do still need to know it. Now, I think Kylie's asking from a testing perspective, and maybe Mark and Phil can answer that. There's also a question about formulas. Do we still need to know the formulas? You know, I've heard some people come back and say there was no math. Now, I don't know, like, I always wonder about that, like what people constitute as math. And there's also a chance of different exams, like people get different, but it's definitely light in the math. I've heard that for sure.
Yeah, I've heard no math, no network diagramming, you know, maybe something on earned value terms, but no math with earned value, no tricky, no decision trees.
Well, let me tell you, earned value. Okay, let me give a pitch for earned value. So I'm working on a contract right now, actually for a contracting company, and I have this report that I use for the financials. So I'm the lead on the contract. It's called the EAC report, and I'm like, oh, what does EAC stand for? They're like, estimated completion. I was like, oh, okay. I'm looking at an earned value management spreadsheet, and this is a massive spreadsheet, financial spreadsheet. So let me just tell you, if you plan to lead a project at any decent large firm, consulting firm, you are going to be doing earned value, whether you like it or not. So my high recommendation is that you understand earned value. I don't do those equations. There's a woman in finance who does it, but I need to understand it, because when I look at that spreadsheet and I've got a cell that uses information from here and there and there, and then it does projections and forecasts and all, if I don't understand as a project manager, it limits my ability to manage that project. It also limits my ability to go up in that company into a higher role. If you don't understand financials, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be a team lead, and you're never going to be a contract lead, at least at a contract company. That's where most of my experience is. But don't worry, I don't sit there and do the math. There's a finance person who does that, and then they walk through it with me. But you need to understand that. And I've had every company I've ever worked for, other than my own, has like an earned value spreadsheet. I'm a little more simplistic for my own stuff, but keep in mind, like, they have to pull all this information together, because the CEO and of the company needs to know, how is the money being spent, what are the profits, all these things, what are our forecasts. All those things are being used to make decisions in the organization. As a project manager, you may not be thinking that big picture, but earned value is not dead. And it's not going to be.
Absolutely, Susan, I concur with you. Yeah, and to that end, Mark, I mean, you were in the age of taking a PMP exam with a scientific calculator, for goodness sake, a scientific calculator.
What are you talking about, Bill? We had an abacus.
So to bring it home, because I know Darryl works in a very schedule and earned value focused firm, and former military, and a lot of my former military friends, they totally get earned value. And that's because a lot of what the DoD does has to be done with earned value.
Right. They love it.
I've worked in those companies. At Honeywell, earned value was the order of the day for my job daily. I needed to have those formulas at my fingertips. So I think PMI forgets their audience. They're forgetting that a lot of their audience is government and military and heavy engineering and very, very heavy predictive stuff over multi-year spans that use earned value. I would not have been able to get my job at Honeywell if I did not know the earned value formulas. It was part of the interview. So for people looking to go into companies like that, when you take away earned value and you say, oh, forget it, it's not important, we're not going to test that, you're also diminishing value that people like me got way back. And it really prepared me for the interview because I knew earned value. And one of the questions on the interview was, how would you implement an earned value management system? It wasn't even the formulas alone. It was like the thinking of it. So going back to what Susan said, if you cannot think earned value, in my opinion, as a project management professional, you're handicapped, in my opinion. My opinion is radical. Susan's opinion is extreme. Mark's opinion is extreme, but we keep it real because this is our life. You know, we're project managers and this is what we do. And these are the expectations. So if you cannot meet that level, it's unfortunate.
So I'd love to hear back if there's a way to do another poll, Phil, or anything for those on the call that are thinking of taking the exam. Have we, you know, how did we do? Did we make you a little more confident about going and taking this exam soon, or
let's use a scale.
Did we utterly fail at that?
Let's use a scale. 1 for yes, 1 for yes, 3 in the middle, 5 for no. 5, you made me feel worse. Mark, Phil, and Susan. Oh dear. And if you would like to ask a question, like if you'd like to really come on and ask your question, we could unmute so that you can ask your question if it's long and we're not able to type it all in. So is there anyone that has a question they would like to ask? Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself, because I see we're at the top of the hour. I want to respect your time. You have any question you would like to unmute yourself and ask? Go ahead. Anyone on YouTube, our friends on YouTube, I want to give them a shout out as well, because they've been very helpful in sending in some comments. So B Spice, we wish you all the best on your CAPM. Yes, Agile is still relevant even for the CAPM. It's in the CAPM content outline. And Latha says, does the exam include calculations, variance, and schedule analysis, critical path EMV? The PMI have definitely pulled back on that. What we can say to you, for those of you who are taking the exam, to give you some practical advice, you know, those graphs where we have in earned value, you have a PV line, then you have an AC line, then you have an EV line. Yeah, you need to know what it means. Like in this one, earned value is above both. So you're under budget, you're ahead of schedule, things like that. You got to know them for the exam. But in terms of the actual nuts and bolts formulas like EACs, we've got 4 of them. I mean, I would love for everyone to know those, but will they be tested on the exam? The answer is probably no, probably. All right, so there's our poll. Let's end and let's share the results. So for the most part, we made folks feel a little bit better, someone in the middle, but if there are questions that we can further answer, we want you to ask them before we jump off this call. Don't jump off.
At least, Phil, we didn't depress that poor person. They are staying where they were at the beginning, I assume.
Yes. Okay. Yes, just not for the test. That's right, Kylie. I think we got all the questions, didn't we? I think we got them all. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. So we talked about many things, but there's one more elephant in the room, Mark. You know what the elephant in the room, Susan, Mark, you remember the elephant in the room? This one. The 13 delivery principles. It will be wrong for us not to talk about these because it throws another wrench into it, or it brings out Pandora's crazy box of grief, if you wanted to call it that. So we got all of these principles. Stewardship, again, they mentioned team and stakeholders, which kind of throws you off because you're like, okay, so they're in the domains, here they are in the principles. They got a bunch of things here. And honestly, look, if we go through, Mark, how many did you say? 1,400 ITTOs? Why don't we just create a principle for every ITTO? Since we want to go principle, let's do it.
And even to go back further, isn't a principle supposed to be a rule, something, a guide for you to go forward with? So therefore, it should be a sentence. It shouldn't just be a noun.
Yes.
It can't be a principle if it's just a noun.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need more than this. And again, it's all over the map, the granularity. So again, we've got stakeholders and team again, which kind of map into knowledge areas, and quality. We've got quality. opportunities and threats kind of maps into something that would go into a risk register,
And
negative risks, positive risks.
Value, why is value and value delivery system separate? Why is team called out separate from stakeholders when team members are actually stakeholders too? I mean, there is something different to say about them, but it's just weird. And it's like a fruit salad.
Oh dear, I'm going to borrow that, Susan. That's a good one.
There's like, I mean, this is oranges and bananas and apples and everything. I mean, I'm not even sure they're all fruit. I think there's some vegetables in there too.
Oh my goodness.
So fruit and vegetable salad. It's confusing. It's confusing.
I think there's a lot of
Keto
garlic.
and vegan together.
I think there's a lot of garlic and some very hot peppers too.
Oh my goodness. I think the takeaway here, the takeaway for PMI, because we're not just doing this to while away the time. We really want those that are close to the ground in the world of PMI to take back our musings and to take this as a subset of the population, right? You've got a very wholesome panel that are multi-certified. Not only are we engineers, we also teach, we also create content, and we look at things analytically. And PMI, our view regarding this is you didn't do enough work. It's all over the place. It's like a fruit salad. Mark said it's even worse than a fruit salad. You can see some bacon bits in here, and it's like vegan and keto together. It's just confusion.
Hey, Bill, here's another idea. We just have a list. And if you've read Rita McColhay's PMP prep book or something, if you ever taken a gander at that, she says one thing that PMI just discovered, or not just PMI, actually, this goes back to earned value and DoD. But in project management, we just don't make lists. We have an invention. We have something that's far, far better than just compiling a long list. What is that? A hierarchical chart that breaks everything down.
Yeah.
So if you hierarchically break this all down in a WBS, you get rid of the duplication, the overlap, you make things more consistent, coherent.
Yeah, rest her soul. I mean, I know she probably wouldn't buy into any of this PMI. and we see that her company didn't follow the ATP bandwagon, and that was a wise decision. I mean, how dare you say, well, we want to teach you how to train, and then you give us this ridiculous ATP garbage bag, with illogically assembled content, to put it mildly. Mark, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Phil, I almost want to call you Dr. Phil, because I want to talk to you about my troubles. I'm going through the Train the Trainer training.
Oh wow.
Oh my God. I have been teaching for well over a decade. I'm a university professor, as you know, got a whole bunch of certifications, and it is not done well. I don't know what else to say. And there really ought to be a way to test out. It has got to be, and I've heard this from my colleagues, for somebody who is a knowledgeable trainer, it is a pure waste of time. And I haven't passed it yet, so I should, maybe knock on wood. But the kinds of things they're saying, and it's interesting because they're talking about making training dynamic and engaging while you're sitting there falling asleep. You're like, how can you like teach me saying it should be engaging in such a non-engaging way? Like, it's so false, and I get it. We all have good days and bad days. And if you record me, I might be flat some days because I don't feel well. But I mean, this is like their gold standard, and it is well under par. And it also is very, very focused on virtual training and training. Some of us, I've been teaching and working virtually for most of the last 2 decades. So to sit there and have somebody explain to me something about Zoom and then say, oh, can you do this in Zoom? I don't remember. What do you think, Bob? Like, you're saying that in the middle of the training. Like, first of all, why don't you focus on what it is you're good at instead of talking about all these training platforms? Like, I like to be tool agnostic, because by the time that video comes out, there's some other tool that everybody's using.
Exactly.
So you should just be tool agnostic and focus on, hey, breakout rooms are great if you have them. If you don't have breakout rooms, do this. Like, talk about it more generically, but they're talking about it very specifically but without knowing that much. And then I also feel like they need somebody, then you got to get involved with cybersecurity. Like you've got to get other, when you start to get into that, you got to talk about encryption and password protection and how you share links, and like you just don't want to open that can of worms.
True. It's not the place for PMI to be telling us how to train and what to use. And they missed the boat. The moment they got that company to put together those ATP materials, and right from the REP group, we could see there was a disconnect between PMBOK and what these people were making into the ATP content. And it was just disaster right from the beginning. They were not mapping up names of ITTOs and where those ITTOs were talked about in the processes. It was all over the place. So I totally agree with you, Susan. I think PMI should stick to what they're good at, which is being a leader in project management. Project management cuts across flavors, whether you are using Agile, you're using hybrid, you're using predictive, and they've purchased Discipline Agile, bless their hearts. I know they want to capture market share, but you cannot, in the disguise of capturing market share, forget your roots, because that's what puts you on the map, for goodness sake. I feel like having a seminar where I teach them why they were the big kahuna. I think they're beginning to lose an understanding of their identity. And that's why they're all over the place, going to Discipline Agile and losing focus. They're losing focus because the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, my goodness, that would have been an opportunity to blow up the whole game. Like if only they could have conceptualized some of the things you folks talked about in your book about hybridization.
Yeah.
They lost it. So anyway, we don't want to keep going on and on. The summary PMI is, perhaps you should scrap the 7th edition. Yes, you want to bring it out in August, but you want to bring out garbage. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. How? Through early and continuous delivery of products. But value, don't just bring out nonsense, bring out value. And the 7th edition, as we are seeing it, is not value.
And Phil, you brought this up in one of the previous podcast webinars. You said very, very aptly that they didn't follow their best practices of listening to their customers, their customer base, polling. So they should have polled the leaders in the different PMI chapters. They should have polled the REPs. They should have polled the main corporations that are sending their project paying good money to send project managers to this training. What are the Fortune 500, the Fortune 50, Fortune 1? What are they going to think? About sending new PMP candidates to this training when they're going to go to training and not speak the same language as the previous set of PMPs.
And I'm hearing it already, Mark. Some of our clients are saying, well, let's just see how PMI is going to dig themselves out of this one. But maybe we need to start thinking about our own in-house qualifications that are not tied or tethered to this bottomless pit of a 7th edition. Because when they look at this image that we've shared this in the past, Mark, this one, when you take a look at the 6th and the 7th, and you see an organization that has invested over $500,000 in the 6th edition and infrastructure to support the learning and development of it, and you look at the 7th and there's absolutely no correlation, just complete cutoff. There is no way, there's no coming back from this. So companies that are deciding to stick with the 6th, yes, go ahead and stick with the 6th. And you got to do what's sensible for your PMO, because there's nothing new under the sun, as the good book says. There's really nothing new. So PMI saying, oh, Eureka, the 7th edition. What do you think the 6th, 5th, 4th, like Mark, you got certified on the 2nd?
First.
On the first. That you cannot take away anything from Mark's knowledge, ability, and aptitude. Yes, he got certified in the first, but he's still with it. And he'll bring it in the questions, in the content he writes. So for anyone to try and say, oh, the 7th, if we don't go to the 7th in this strange, oblique way, we're doomed. No, you're wrong.
There's no real, project management is a very difficult job, no doubt, because we're in that classic situation where we're trying to get all these different stakeholders, and many of them outrank us, the sponsor, the customer, other senior managers in our organization. and they've got different needs, different wants. So a lot of conflict and disparity in what they're looking for in the project. But nonetheless, we have to get them all together. We have to get them on the same page. And we don't have the power to dictate anything. That is a very tough situation to be in. And that's what project management really is all about. It is, as Susan said, it is really all about people skills, which really reduces to good communications, which really reduces to listening and good listening skills. But that is tough. And there's nothing new. That this isn't rocket science, but it's difficult.
Absolutely. Well, I think if for PMI members and PMI workers who are listening, I think you really need to involve your stakeholders a lot more, because you bring out a product, and that's why I said get a cue from page 8 and 9 in this, because you'll understand that maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. What have you been doing for the past 2 years, PMI? I don't understand. The 7th edition is meant to be simpler, right? But I don't know what they're doing. So all the hallmarks, it has all the hallmarks of a disastrous project. It has all the hallmarks of a disastrous project. Now, to end on a good note, because I don't want to take everyone down to oblivion. No, let's end on a good note.
We're going to head out to the bars, Phil.
Let's just go to the bar. All right, let's go to PMI bar and see what they've got. So going to PMI bar, one of the things I must applaud the PMI on, if we go to what's new, I like the what's new inclusion. And if you go to what's new, you can check out some of the latest developments in PMI. And, to their credit, they've got some good stuff out here. They've got the project management ready section, which honestly, I think that was brilliant. Just helping people understand more about project management without being fully committed into a full-blown CAPM or PMP. I like the way the PMI is recognizing Agile is important. I will not take that away from them. And I respect their decision to look for a company they can purchase and invest in. It's okay. But I just don't want them to think everything they've done is wrong. No, it's not all wrong. I quite like the wicked problem solving, and I saw one of my heroes from Autodesk present here, and that's good. And he's a very interesting presenter, and they got him to do this. That was good. Not sure about the price point, PMI, because you got to remember, not everyone is making 6 figures, so to try and consider that, PMI. But one more thing I want to drum on here is Standards Plus and Kickoff. I think these are brilliant initiatives. Kickoff is a free 45-minute learning tool that guides you through the basics of project management. Brilliant. PMI, you got this one right. I'll give you that one. You got that one right. Standards Plus, while I applaud Standards Plus, I don't think we need to throw all the knowledge areas and process groups in here to be forgotten about. But I took a tour of Standards Plus yesterday. I was pleasantly surprised to see some pretty good video and content. And if you're a member of the PMI, this stuff is free. So I was really excited about that. And going back up to the top, project management ready, I would highly advise anyone that's a trainer, a coach, you're working with people that are pretty clueless about project management. This might be a good one for you to begin to get people involved, because if you're out of high school, this could be a good one for you to begin taking a look at and knowing a little bit more about project management fundamentals, Agile, anything. So on that note, there's some things PMI home run as usual, but regarding the ATP program, fail. Regarding PMBOK7, no. Go back to the drawing board. I quite like the idea of making it digital. You heard about that, Mark and Susan, that they're going to be digital for a large part of it. I think that's smart, and that's agile, because you'll realize it ain't working, and then they won't have all this overhead of millions of copies that they need to throw down the garbage, because that's what will end up happening when you see the big kahuna companies not using it. Because let's be honest, like Susan said, you are not going to stop many of the colleges and learning institutions from training with the 10 knowledge areas or the 5 process groups. So they need to wake up and smell that coffee.
ISO, there's an ISO standard of the 10 knowledge areas. So I think it's ISO 21500. Is that right, Susan, Phil? I'm pretty sure that's...
I'm not
It's
sure if
ISO
they're,
standard.
yeah, it's
I
ISO.
don't think they're changing anytime soon.
I know
Yeah,
it's
and it's
ISO.
just,
Yeah.
you know, it's the hardest thing I think in learning something is kind of wrapping your head around it. Like what is there to learn? And the way that it's organized is just, it's confusing. And you know, it's funny, in the ATP training, they use an example of a house and building a house, and what order would you use to build the house? Again, you're like, great example, great explanation. And then they proceed from that to go into the order they're using to define version 7. And you're like, that makes no sense. Like, your example is great, but what you're actually doing doesn't relate to your best practice. And so I don't know, it's disturbing. It's kind of discombobulated. I also think that they you talk about like working with stakeholders, use the chapters. I mean, the chapters are awesome. I actually know one of my friends and colleagues. She's in charge of professional development, and she said, you know, I looked at the numbers and I can't justify us being an ATP just to offer PMP. And she said it's really disturbing because PMP is what our chapter has made money off of, that allows us to provide programs for people, including people who are unemployed, and helping them get employment, helping, like, they actually, chapters need money to provide something to the community.
True.
Right. So you know, you take money in some places and then you give it in others by creating a job fair or things like that. Well, those things cost money. And so the chapters now have to either increase their dues or find another place for revenue. But the PMP, a lot of people just say, I want to get a PMP, I'm going to go to my chapter. And it made sense. And they had good, you know, good solid trainers, because a chapter wasn't going to stand behind somebody unless they were a good solid trainer. And now, you know, now they're going out and finding ATPs, but they may find this ATP isn't really that great anyway.
Do you think they should scrap the program based on what you've seen so far, Mark? Don't you think they should revert back?
Reform it, reform it. I mean, there's value in them having a program. I just think what they put together doesn't
again, we had more than 2,000 REPs, and that created a lot of diversity. So that there was a lot of creativity, a lot of diversity in the creation of these materials. You had everything from very small companies like my company to pretty large companies like Rita's company or Velociteach, Project Management Academy and such.
And so 2 of those you mentioned didn't join their program, by the way.
Right. So Project Management Academy is an ATP, but the other 2 are not.
They're not. Yep.
No, they're not.
That was a good call.
So you cut out a lot of creativity, and I was very offended. I mean, there were 2 good reasons for me not to decide not to become an ATP. Number 1, they increased the price by 4 times.
Yeah.
You know, they were going to really and that's hard for a small company to absorb that. And then I would also have had to pay them $100 a student for every student in a class.
Yeah.
But the worst thing, even more insulting, more unacceptable, was that I would have to teach from somebody else's stuff. So stuff created by this other company that had never created before a PMP prep course. Yeah. And so I was insulted by that. And I was also insulted that they said, we've got a lot of complaints about REP training programs, and therefore we need to take control, and we need to enforce quality, and we need to establish, you know, one standard of training materials. Wrong. If you've got complaints about a company, about an REP, go after them. Don't go after all of us, because you know, 95% of the REPs, I think, were doing a very good job.
Yeah.
And they've been
I think they went from being like very hands off to being like entirely too hands on, like kind of like your kids going to school and they're not getting good grades, but you're not helping them with homework, you're not doing anything. And then one day the kid comes home and you say, guess what? You're going to military school. And you're like, what? It's like, there's a large gradient in between, right? So it's like, and like Mark just said, you sent everybody to like boot camp when not everybody needed to go to boot camp.
To Paris Island here.
Exactly. And instead of just saying, hey, these people are having issues, let's work with them, let's deal with them. I've never been an REP, but I've worked for lots of REPs.
Yeah.
And to me, it was all about copyright infringement and just some basic standard things and how you trademark, PMI and all that. Like that's all they really cared about, and reuse of material. And they went from that's totally hands off to being like, you can't teach unless you use our material. End of story. And you're just like, oh my gosh, there's so many things in between they could have done.
And the material isn't that great.
Huh?
I said the material, like you said, isn't that great.
No.
No,
And the one thing I know every REP wished they had for what they were paying, and I'm sure ATPs wish this too, is just a set of practice questions that comes from PMI. So you don't have to go try to pretend and make it, but like, so that it comes from PMI and people can take the practice question and feel good.
So actually, Susan, they did that about a year ago or a little over a year ago for the first time. And I've been involved with them for 25 years now. For the first time, a little over a year ago, they put out on PMI.org a 200 question practice test made up of real questions from an earlier exam. So it's holy moly, you finally did that.
They got that right.
Now that doesn't exist now, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think it still exists for those who had access before the cutoff. So if someone had access last year and they went in now, they at least, I'm basing this on about 3-4 months back, I could still go in 2021 and see that exam. So
yeah, but it wouldn't be relevant for today.
A little bit of it would be, because the questions are still situational, and some of them are kind of agnostic.
They were tough questions.
They were tough.
So they're probably not representative of today's exam.
Not completely, yeah. But we've heard from some students. So this one, I don't know if you've heard this recently. We had a couple of students who got certified recently, and they said the exam is now from a lopsided 70-30 or 90-10. It was now 50-50 for those students. So for those who are listening, taking the exam, take it with a pinch of salt when you hear it's going to be 70-30. Some students have said it was 50-50. And that was interesting to hear. And that's the problem with PMI. They're hard to understand, right? When you say it's going to be 50-50, but then people are taking the test and they're like, it's 90% agile. I had a student that said, it's 95% agile, Phil. Thank goodness we spent so much time learning agile because I killed it. But at the same time, I'm concerned. I'm like, 95%? Seriously? So I don't know what PMI is doing as far as the titration to get the right exam, mix. I don't know what they're doing, but they need to correct it pretty quick, and they need to get back on the bandwagon. So with PMBOK Guide 7, our final decision is it doesn't cut it. There are a lot of things wrong with it. You'd probably be better going to revise it again, and it's okay. Just scrap it. Do it, PMI. Do it properly. Second thing is an ATP program. It is a disastrous program. The content is horrible. The people delivering the content are frustrated. Talk about Theory X management. Horrible. And last but not least, the way forward, you're doing some really great things on the website, project management ready, kickoff, all that stuff. Standards plus, very visionary, thought leadership oriented, great stuff. But you need to make a tweak to go back to your roots. And while you're in your roots, still keep pushing the agile agenda, because it's fantastic. You should. But don't mistake agile software development for agile thinking. PMI, you need to think agile. Don't try to do agile software development. Don't run after market share. Run after value. If you add value to your customers, they will add value to you. And it's a principle, All right. Any final comments, Mark, Susan?
No,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
All right.
Really appreciate you setting this up, Phil. So thank you so much. It's great working with you.
Thank you. And we hope we can do this again. YouTube, thank you. All of our friends on the call, we appreciate you. We'll go ahead and end the recording, and we'll see you folks soon. Take care.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.